Hello, all, and welcome to History with R&R Live. With me, as always, Jeff Franklin. How are we doing?
Doing great. How are you, Robert?
Oh, can't complain. Can't complain too much. Besides, nobody ever listens. All right. So with that, I'm going to take a quick. Before we bring in our guest, I'm going to take a quick spin through chat. Welcome, my love, Mrs. Canuck. Hopefully, work isn't driving you too crazy. Welcome, Mark the Infly Tired. Thomas Potts, welcome, sir. John DeMarco, welcome. Captain Trek, welcome, sir. It's been a minute. Game Hammer Classics Gaming, welcome. Number one, welcome. Dave G Sound, welcome. And without further ado, I guess we'll bring up a man who really was instrumental in getting me started on YouTube, so blame him. And Bird. Bird was a big part of it, but this man has some of the blame. Welcome, Salty Trekker.
Good morning, Salty Trekker. And I have you and Bird to blame as well.
Well, I'm happy to take credit for that because you know what, I'm thrilled that the what I call the nerd community has grown and gone out in weird and different directions and done stuff that I never would have imagined, and not just been a bunch of carbon copies of the same channel over and over, or like other groups out there. So
yes, and speaking of growing, I want to thank everyone. Over the weekend we smashed the 200.
Awesome.
History with R&R is now officially over 200. Thank you to anybody who ever shared out the link, watched a video. I hope everybody enjoyed the last radio show. We almost killed Jeff again. Next one, I promise to almost kill Jeff again.
You're abusing Jeff? Why are you doing that?
Oh, yeah, we almost kill him every radio show.
It was a tradition that Doom
It's
started.
A tradition that Richard started, and I just carry it on. But with that,
it's all in fun.
Yeah.
All in fun.
Jeff always gets the final line. So at least we give him that. We always give him the final line. With that, I guess lead us into the direction that we are going to go today, Salty.
Well, you know, I know that you guys talk about military and stuff like that a lot, and I know that while I have a military background, and that was one of the reasons you initially invited me, I wanted to just talk about something else because you guys already know more about the military than even I do, even though I serve. So I figured let's talk about something else. And one thing that I do feel a lot of passion about, especially in recent years, and I know this affects you very directly, Robert, but also a lot of people in the community, and that is disability. And what a lot of people don't realize the rather striking changes in the plight of the disabled in recent years, and how it's gone in just the last 40-50 years, from almost zero support whatsoever to what we have now, and how, man, we are in a golden age for people with disabilities right now in comparison to very, very recently. But even now, we still have a long ways to go in some ways, but just looking at what's changed and where we're at, and we should also look at where are we going and where can we grow. Now, I can't speak for Canada, obviously, because I don't know anything about what you Canucks do other than, you know, swim in maple syrup and eat moose meat.
We sell that to you. We don't use it. Or at least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Canada has released a huge reserve of maple syrup.
I
understand. Yeah, because there's a shortage.
Well, there you go. The maple syrup reserve is being released. Very slowly,
we'll just tap
running
a few more
south.
trees, and although we are still working on sending you fixing that global warming situation down there, we're going to send you some snow.
Thank you. I'll take some in West Central Texas.
Yeah,
you know, we're going to fix that global warming situation down there. We're going to send you some nice weather and some nice snow because we're sick of it.
Send some to Tennessee. I would love to see some.
Now, Salty, Thomas Potts is a little disappointed. He wants to know about Noah's Ark.
Yeah, of course he does.
Well, he should know all about it. Wasn't he on it?
Well, you know, in fairness, I know a lot of people kid about my age, but when I was in the military, you know, I joined the military in the 1980s, and I joined shortly after the Panama incident, but I got out shortly before Operation Desert Storm, which means that I served in between two two combat arenas. I didn't serve, and I'm thankful for it. I didn't serve during any active combat. And so, which any person who has served will consider that a blessing.
Yes.
People like to talk about war stories, but at the same time, the best war story is to not have one.
Yeah.
And so I'm very thankful for that. But at the same time, that makes my, stories to tell, rather boring, and the only stories that I have that are interesting I can't tell.
Yeah.
So you can make
how it works.
Catch 22.
Yeah. So but the and that's why I figured, well, might as well put the military stuff on the side. But the but here's the interesting thing about that is when we talk about people with disabilities in this country, a lot of people think about what's in the United States. We have something that we refer to as the ADA, 3 capital letters, which stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is basically the overriding law that governs how to handle persons with disabilities. This is what requires that buildings have access points for people with disabilities. This is what requires that when you go to the store that they have handicap parking spaces. This is what makes it so that if you are an employer and a person with a disability applies for a job, if it is reasonable that you make an accommodation so that their disability, they can do the job with their disability, you have to make that accommodation. That's what the ADA is all about. And a lot of people just take that for granted because, the ADA, this is this thing that's been around forever. And it's really made it so that people with disabilities get a fair shake in society, and some people think maybe a little too fair a shake. But what a lot of people don't realize is that this is not ancient history.
No.
The ADA was passed in 1990. This is 3 years after I met my wife. So so the ADA is not like this, this thing that's been around generations past. This is something that is, very, very recent. And that means that kids growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s did not have these benefits. So someone like myself who grew up not knowing that I had a learning disability, there were no programs in school. There were no tests.
No, it was dummy up and focus.
Yeah, I constantly, I will tell you, in primary school and high school and everything, every single report card, he's not applying himself, he's not living up to his potential, he's not trying hard enough, all that stuff. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that I found out that I was dyslexic.
Yeah.
And I had no idea. Because the only thing I knew about dyslexia was the occasional public service announcement, and you saw these stupid pictures of letters flipping backwards, like that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not what it looks like, because if that's what it looked like, it would be obvious you were dyslexic.
Yeah. There's a footprint.
Yeah. But and now my father's generation, it was even worse, right? So for my dad, for my dad, and this was actually kind of interesting, certain types of disabilities are related and genetic, and I did a little bit of research when I found out about my son being autistic. The autism spectrum is very interesting, and there's some interesting statistical things that go along with it. Like if you have a child who is autistic, it's statistically much more likely that their parents work in a technical field. Part of the reason for that is because autism is people who are autistic tend to be emotional. It's almost like how there's mental retardation is a lack of intellectual ability. Autism is a lack of emotional ability, but a heightened intellectual ability. And so autistic kids tend to be very good at engineering type skills, but very poor at emotional connections.
Yeah.
And so that's why people who are mildly autistic or like Asperger's and stuff tend to make good engineers, tend to make good scientists, stuff like that, but would make very poor say therapists or something like that. My dad was an electrical engineer, and not only that, but then later in life, my mom she actually got a degree in and became a licensed therapist, and basically very quickly realized that my dad was undiagnosed Asperger's his entire life.
Yeah.
And not only that, but his cousin was as well. And his cousin, who's still alive, it's very obvious looking at my dad's cousin that he has Asperger's. And, you know, to them, to their generation, no, they're just odd.
Yeah.
They're you know, they don't get the benefit of a disability. No, they are just odd, and they just need, you know, whatever, you know, shut up and do your job.
Well, and in a way, it still exists to this day, because if you look at me, you would never know just by looking that I have a disability, because mine are unseen.
Well, except you're Canadian.
Well, no, that's an advantage.
I'm going to stay out of that one.
Yeah, but the biggest war has always been between the visible disability and the invisible disability.
Right.
So your Asperger's or anything like that is like, oh no, he's just trying to get out of doing it. That was one of the things. Or, you know, he's just trying to be lazy and stay home. Or he looks fine. Why can't he go out to work? Or, you know, it's always on what you look. Now, if you're missing both your legs and one of your arms, well, then of course, you know.
Well, and that's where we get into now is, now that we're I think we're getting better at identifying some of these things. But as we're getting better at identifying some of these things, then we get people who, with some of these things that aren't so obvious on the surface, like you're saying, some of the more the less visible disabilities. So like myself with MS, like you just look at me, I don't look disabled, right?
No.
If you see me walking, sure, I walk with a cane, but aside from that, I look relatively normal. If you see someone with a condition like fibromyalgia, or you see someone with, you know, a lot of these conditions that are real conditions, but are difficult to see on the surface, and you just say, "Oh, they're just claiming that so that they can not have to work," or, and because, well, before 1990, they would have had to work.
Yeah.
Or they would have just ended up being that crazy homeless person on the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, so the question then becomes, well, you know, what would be, you know, what would be the right answer? What is, you know, would they have been the crazy homeless person on the street, or would they have just been working? I think they would have just been the crazy homeless person on the street.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that, you know, like I see a person like myself, you know, and I can only speak from my own experience. I know that I'm not physically capable of doing any kind of general labor. And so, you know, there's literally nothing I could do. And so either, you know, either I would have to be taken care of by family, or I would end up under a bridge somewhere.
Yep.
You know, and that's what happened to a lot of our disabled. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially people with various psychiatric issues, still end up like that.
Yeah.
And you know, people that end up, you know, that have various forms of schizophrenia and stuff like that, that won't or can't seek help
because of the stigma attached.
Right.
Because there's also,
or, you know, and it's actually kind of interesting. I was watching a video of a person who suffers from schizophrenia, and well, suffer is probably even the wrong word. But he was talking about the interesting thing about it, that I never thought about it this way, but as a person who had schizophrenia, you know, he heard voices, and he was being interviewed by this person, and the person was asked, he was talking about, he found it very tempting very frequently to not take his medication because he found himself lonely, because he didn't hear the voices.
Yeah.
And so how incredibly alone it made him feel to not hear the voices in his head. So for those people under the bridges, for those that might be schizophrenic, is it because they don't want to, you know, if they end up, you know, seeking help, what's the first thing they're going to do? Put them on antipsychotics. They put them on antipsychotics, they stop hearing the voices.
Yeah.
And then they stop hearing the voices, they feel lonely.
Yeah, it's like everything else. Like if you have a bung leg, you overcompensate with your other leg.
Right.
And it just becomes natural. Well, if all of a sudden this leg is fixed, you're still going to overcompensate.
Right. So what do you do with that? And it's so the question becomes, where do we go? How do we fix it to where, you know, can we make it so that, can we create a society where it is possible to help people that need help without also opening the door for people that do just want to milk the system?
Yeah.
I don't know that,
because you're always going to get you're always going to get the bad egg, no matter what you do.
I know that for some conditions, yes, there are ways to test. Like for me, you know, I like, obviously for you with your dialysis, well, you can't fake that, right?
No.
For someone like myself with MS, well, you can see on my brain scans the lesions on my brain. But
a good example would be the ankylosing spondylitis, because with that, it's so rare that doctors don't like diagnosing it, because, well, it can't be that. It's got to be something else. Oh, it's just muscle pain. You must have just moved wrong or lifted something wrong. Take it easy for a couple of days and you'll be fine. Because I dealt with that for years. Because it's not something that is like, basically once it shows up on an X-ray, it's too late. But that's how they gauge it. They wait for it to show up on an X-ray.
So I wonder, though, you know, if we, because we've gone from a society, you know, 50 years ago, where we've had the doctors had no power, and today the doctors have no power.
Yeah, they really don't. It's all politicians.
Right. And the problem is that what we've done is we've just taken the healthcare power and moved it from basically 50 years ago, it was Wild West. It was like, hey, if you have, it was really kind of what, not picking on you, Robert, but it was kind of what non-Americans think America is, where, hey, if you got the money in your pocket, you can do it.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it was like 50 years ago. Today, it's more or less, well, it's managed by bureaucrats. It's managed by number crunchers. It's not managed by doctors. Is there a way to get the power where it needs to be, which I think is in the hands of healthcare professionals? Because I think that's where it needs to be. I think
the other problem with that is the old, it's kind of become a joke within me, but have you ever tried to get 3 doctors to agree on anything?
But that's where I think that's a good point. But I think that's
because I have the kidney doctors, I have my back specialist, and my family doctor. My family doctor, for the most part, goes above my pay grade. The back specialist will blame the kidney. The kidney doctors will blame the back. And they'll argue about it for about 2 months, and then they'll make progress.
But you see, that's where I think, and this again goes back to, I think, putting power into the healthcare professional instead of the bean counter. We need to build a relationship with our doctors and build the hierarchy with the doctors, rather than have the hierarchy be the doctors report to the health insurer.
Yeah.
Right? Because for example, if in my case, I look at, even though, like, I know that you have what you call your primary care physician, right? Who's your general practitioner.
Yeah. That's
and then for me, I also have a neurologist that I see very regularly, because she's the specialist that deals with EMS. But for me, my neurologist is really my primary doctor.
Yeah.
And everything goes through her. If my primary care doctor is suggesting something, I'm going to send a message to my neurologist.
Yeah, like say, with mine, with my family doctors recommending, it goes through Brar, then it goes through the kidney, because there's the hierarchy. The kidney doctors are up at top, then there's Brar, and then there's the family doctor way down here somewhere.
But I'm thinking, is there a way so that that's where the decision making is done, instead of then they go to, now they need to get it approved by the insurance company, or in the case of, I don't know what you call it in the
Manitoba Medical.
Yeah. So, but that's the problem, is that, like, for example, I'm waiting right now, because my neurologist, I'm waiting for my next MRI, because they need to keep scanning my brain every so often to monitor the progress of the brain lesions, which is so weird to think of. But I have to wait until the insurance company is willing to pay for it.
See, and that's one thing I don't have to worry about up here. The doctor just says MRI, and then you go for an MRI. It's the waiting list that can be a pain.
But you see, we don't have the waiting list, but we have to wait for the approval from the insurance company.
Yeah, which is normally about a month. It's about a month and a half, give or take.
Your waiting time?
Yeah, from the time it's ordered to the time I get my MRI, it's usually about a month, maybe 2 tops. Unless I'm already in the hospital, and then they just go down to the main floor and wheel you in and put you in the MRI machine.
See, the closest thing I saw to what I would like to see, like if I were dictator of the world for a day, and I know some people are going to hate me in a second, but there is a health insurance system in some of the United States. And I know that it probably works well in some states and not so well in others, but at least in Oregon, where we were, it worked pretty well. It's called Kaiser Permanente. And what Kaiser did which is a little unique compared to most health insurance companies, is the health insurance and the health provider, same company.
Yeah.
So the doctor technically is the insurance provider. And so, or the health provider and the insurance provider are the same, so basically there's no call the insurance company for an approval. If the doctor says we're going to do it, it's already approved.
Yeah.
There's no need to worry about getting a referral to go to a specialist. If the doctor says, oh, you need to talk to a neurologist, he says, go down the hallway to neurology and you're in.
Yeah.
And the only downside to the Kaiser system was that you absolutely could not go anywhere that was not a Kaiser facility.
Yeah.
And so if you were a Kaiser member, you could not go to a non-Kaiser facility at all.
Yeah.
Unless basically, if you did, you would get billed at the full rate that doctor charged, and then you would have to spend the next 6 months trying to get reimbursed.
Yeah.
And good luck. And you get reimbursed for like a quarter of what you paid.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Mm-hmm. See, and for me, that's foreign up here.
Right.
Right. Completely a foreign language, because doctor goes, you need specialist, you go to specialist, plain and simple. There's no approval from anyone. It's just, here's your referral and have a nice day, and they'll be in contact.
Right.
And then usually a week or two later, you get, okay, you're meeting up with this doctor in a month. Have fun.
Yeah. And yes, Mrs. Canuck, Kaiser Permanente is available in California as well. I had it in California, and it worked pretty well there too. And yeah, the nice thing about it was that if, like I said, as long as you were in a Kaiser facility, if your copays were all the same, there was a Kaiser pharmacy in every Kaiser facility. You just went to that pharmacy, you flashed your Kaiser card, they pull your prescription, bam, it was easy peasy. Everything was simple, and everybody could pull your records. Everybody could do everything. It was very, very simple, very standardized. The problem would be, of course, that to do that on a national level would mean that basically every doctor, every healthcare provider would have to
be going to a national healthcare system.
Right. Which, of course, most conservatives would immediately start screaming that we were communist and,
yes.
Get your guns.
So, yeah. So, I mean, like for me, your system gives me a headache.
It gives everybody a headache.
and I don't mean that in a derogatory. It's just I go, what? You have to what? The
American healthcare system. It's people say, well, it's good quality care, and it is. I'm not going to lie. I think that the quality of care that you can get in the United States is great. And anybody that tries to poo-poo the quality of care in the United States doesn't understand the quality of care in the United States. There's a reason that people come to the United States to get procedures done. That much is absolutely indisputable. But navigating the system is an absolute nightmare, especially for people that are underinsured. And so that's a major problem. And you run into a few common arguments that some of which I find quite frankly offensive, like the argument that, well, then they just need to get better insurance, or they just need to make more money, that kind of thing. It's like, wow, you're just an a-hole. But
you haven't had to live in the real world, have you? No? Right. Okay.
Well, not everybody,
down, little Billy.
Right. Not everybody can work for, a Fortune 50 company.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know, I've been very blessed in that I've worked for, you know, working for Verizon Wireless. They had really good health care. Working for Comcast, they had really good health care. I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Oregon, really good health care.
You think?
Yeah, but you know, so I've worked for companies that provided me with really good healthcare. I've also made it a very a very purposeful part of my life that I would always make it a part of when if I was looking for a job, healthcare was an important part of. I wouldn't even think about applying for a company that didn't have good healthcare as part of the package.
Yeah.
But not everybody thought about that. You know, a lot of people, because and sometimes desperation. You know, sometimes if you're not working and you just need to find a job, and the only thing available is flipping burgers at Burger King, you're going to take what you can get.
Yeah.
You know, and if that's what you can get, and Burger King only offers you cut rate health insurance, and that's you paying 90% of the premiums, you know, you're going to deal with it. So there's, you know, the heartless argument. I'm sorry, I don't buy that. And the, you know, and I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm not, you know, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist or any of that crap. But I do think that we need to look at what is the best way to efficiently get the most health care for our collective buck, because if we're bleeding out as a country, guess what? We're bleeding out.
Yeah.
And so
do you think that like where we were, so back if we go to where my dad was when he was born to where when he died, it was a completely different system. When my dad was born, it was 1928. And a lot of the things that, you know, my dad, you know, his way of looking at things.
Your dad was born in 28?
My stepfather was born in 28, yeah.
Okay. Oh, your stepfather. I was going to say,
stepfather,
how old are you?
My 37.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no way
I was born an uncle to a 14-year-old. Go figure. You know how weird that is to be on the playground and, you know, like your 14-year-old nephew is going, oh, you know, and his friends are like, oh, is that your little cousin? No, that's my uncle. I'm just saying it's a trip. But no, my biological sperm donor took off the minute he found out my mom was, and then my dad took care of my mom because he made her a deal because he noticed my mom wasn't eating. So he said, you cook it, I'll buy it. And then from there, a year after I was born, they were married. But my stepfather was born in 28. So I grew up with a very, very different outlook. My dad, you know, he'd look around and he'd just be like, lazy bugger, get to work. Right. It was my dad. It was just, you know, what the hell? You know, when I left school to take care of him, I got 1 year reprieve. Once he was back on his feet, I was working 2 jobs. By the time he was back on his feet, I was working 2 jobs and paying my way at home. Because
when your dad was young, you could pay for an office visit with a couple of chickens.
When my dad was young, as he put it, he could buy his case of beer, his pack of cigarettes, fill his car full of gas for $10.
Right. But seriously, you know,
change.
Yeah, health insurance, as we think about it today, was unnecessary. And people come up with different theories and arguments as to why healthcare has gotten so expensive over the years, but they forget about the insane advances in health technology.
Yeah,
things like MRI machines.
Mm-hmm.
CAT scans.
Well, even break it down even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about this, when I was a teenager, and I had asthma. So when I was even younger than that, 8, 9, 10, when I had asthma really bad, and I'd have to go in and they'd stick that EKG machine on you. Nowadays you go in and it's a very small little thing. They put it on, they pull it off, you don't feel it. Right. When I was a kid, the thing they put on for the EKG machine was this big round circular thing with a metal pin in the middle that when you put it on, you had to take a bath to take the stupid thing off. Otherwise, it would hurt like a son of a bitch. Right. Just a little thing like that has changed in 30 years.
Well, and things like the type of research that's being done to come up with like these drugs that are based on genetic sequencing and stuff like that. You know, it's crazy the type of stuff that's being done in healthcare these days.
Yeah.
And this stuff ain't cheap.
No. Well,
no, sure isn't.
Yeah.
I can do an example of that.
Although I think it's cheaper than what we're paying.
Well, you know, it's interesting because a lot of what we're paying for in like the shots that I take, the Copaxone, which is the therapy that I take for my MS, it works out to $500 a shot. Right, it's $6,000 a month for the medication.
Yeah.
Now, there is a little bit of a weirdness, a disparity as far as how much Americans pay versus how much the rest of the world pays, where Americans pay an inflated rate compared to, say, Canada. And there are some interesting political things going on there. But a lot of that has to do with recouping the cost of the R&D on these various drugs. And, you know, say what you want about it, but I'm just glad that the drug exists.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, for instance, there's this, my injection.
Right.
Which is, it's a genetically engineered chemical that makes my body it slows down my body's ability to create inflammation, which slows down ankylosing, because with ankylosing there is no treatment and there's no cure. They treat the side effects, right, not the disease.
Right.
So, and this is $250. The last one I had was $700 an injection, but this one was $250 an injection. Thankfully I don't pay for it, but, you know.
And Game Hammer, you say no medication is worth that. I respectfully disagree.
Yeah. Yeah. I can second that. Because what a lot of, I think another argument that is made in this realm is the argument between pain that goes away and chronic pain.
Right. Because
you see people who have chronic pain who, you know, you'll see them out with their kids or whatever, and they're or out shopping or whatever, and they're like, oh, they must be feeling great today. No, they're doing that in spite of how they feel.
Yeah. I will tell you that, and please, nobody that's ever said this, do not take this as a rebuke or an insult. But the worst thing I hear all the time is, hey, Salty Trekker, glad to see you. Looks like you're feeling better today.
Yeah.
I hate hearing that. I so hate hearing that. Because, I haven't felt better in years. So,
and the other thing, like, I think the biggest thing I've struggled with is how jaded I have become.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've noticed that with yourself, but where 10 years ago, somebody stubbed their toe or something, or had a headache, or was a little under the weather, you could feel that sympathy for them. Mm-hmm. And then now you're like, is that it? Really?
Yeah,
that's all you're complaining about?
Well,
seriously?
You sound like a crotchety old man.
Yeah. It's like, seriously? Get in line. That's a Tuesday. Go away. All right. And I think that's my biggest hurdle is, not being that way, because you automatically just go and.
And so Mons Elysium says, I think no medication should cost more than a patient can afford. I think we agree with you in principle on that. But the problem, it's now the research and development costs, they are going to be what they are. The problem is that we need to figure out a way it's about getting the access to the average person. How do we properly, because the medication's got to be paid for.
Yes.
I mean, the cost of the medication is based on the development costs of the medication. And I know that people all have their conspiracy theories about how evil pharmaceutical companies are, blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's not only that, but it's shipping, it's getting it to the,
mm-hmm.
So if like the cost of getting it to the pharmacy in Winnipeg is low. The cost of getting to a pharmacy in Nunavut, which is way up in the middle of nowhere, is enormous.
Right. And Random Menace says, I look worse than 4 hours ago. Is that better? Yes, that's better. But and think about, like, for example, the Copaxone. Okay, now granted, yes, I know $500 a shot is expensive. Keep in mind, this stuff is perishable. It has to be shipped to me in special containers, packed on ice. I have to keep it refrigerated. Mm-hmm. They have to make it in small batches because, yes, it is, it spoils quickly and all that. So yes, there are things to take into consideration besides just the cost of the stuff that's in it. And it is an expensive process. And it costs them, billions of dollars to develop. And I will say this for the company. This is not a drug that they take lightly. I get a call every couple of weeks from nurse practitioners from their company to check with me to make sure I'm not having any severe side effects, to ask me a series of questions about how I'm doing. And that call is not a little 30-second call. I'm on the phone with these nurses for a good amount of time, and they have to call every single person that's taking this drug. All right. Yeah. So they have thousands of nurses on staff that all have to be paid. That has to be worked into the cost of the drug. All right. So this is not a cheap operation. And so that has to be worked into the cost as well. So I get it that can the cost be mitigated at some point? Absolutely. I also think that it would be interesting to see how much would drugs cost in the United States if everybody in the world paid the same amount for the drugs.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
So you're saying we're subsidizing the rest of the world?
Yes, I am.
Random Menace has a comment. He says, sorry, but the price of insulin in the USA is ridiculously overpriced. I understand new medications, but where you need to pay R&D, but Salty's medicine was paid years ago. So was insulin.
Right. But again, we are subsidizing. We and that has to, I don't I don't know why it is the way that it is. I'm not, talk.
But here's my question. Mm-hmm. In regards to subsidizing and, the rest of the world doesn't pay and blah, blah, blah. If the United States government came out tomorrow and said the price for insulin is XYZ, period, mm-hmm. would that company then go, okay, we're not making it anymore? So
I think somebody would make it.
Right. So here's my question. If the government came out tomorrow and said, okay, we are across the board in the United States, the price for X, Y, and Z cannot exceed this. would the companies therefore go, okay, we're not making it anymore? Or would they adjust so that they're still making money and not going out of business? Because I would bet money that they would adjust and they would still be selling that product.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think part of the problem is that the government subsidizes the hospitals, and so the hospitals set a price and the government pays it. And for those that don't have the government helping to pay, they're footing the bill, for this huge amount.
Part of that, but some of it, like Copaxone, because that's the one drug that I know intimately well. Copaxone is in the United States is $6,000 per month, assuming you take it at the same rate that I do. Okay, in the United States. If you take Copaxone in Canada, it's approximately $16,000 per year.
Yeah.
So it is significantly cheaper in Canada. Now, it's still an expensive drug.
But I will also argue, and we've had this argument, that to blatantly outright say, well, the reason Canada has it is because we pay for it, is a bunch of bullshit. Because if you look down at how much taxpayer dollars per year goes into our healthcare system, it dwarfs yours.
Right.
By the population.
But the amount of money going to the corporation is $16,000 a year versus $6,000 a month.
Yes, because our government makes it that way, which is why I posed the question. If the United States government forced the price down,
then they would go out of business.
No, they wouldn't. They'd adjust.
You think that but then so then who's going to pay the nurses and who's going to pay for the drug? If they still there. Exactly, because and this is the problem and this is where I think the economics don't add up. If you squeeze it down, then but those costs don't disappear. Well, it's just like if a balloon. If you squeeze one part of a balloon, another part of the balloon gets fatter.
Here's the other part you're missing, Anti-Tracker or Salty Tracker. Okay. If a company knows they can inflate the bill here, they're going to get as much money out of that product as possible. So if I know I can sell my apples to Billy for $30, but I know that Jeff will only pay $15, well, I'm going to sell them to Jeff for $15 and I'm going to sell them to Billy for $30 because I know Billy will pay $30.
But you're making this grand assumption that Copaxone really only costs $16,000 a year to produce. That just because Canada says this is all we're going to pay, that's all it really costs them.
They would make it so that that's all it costs them. Honestly, any company worth its salt will do it because it's supply and demand.
You can't force the price. You can only.
The United States does it all the time.
No, they don't. We have when they do, it usually causes massive problems. And that's the problem. You can't, like, if you say, okay, this is how much you're going to charge for a product, then either the quality of the product suffers or they make up the money somewhere else. That's what ends up happening. That's why.
But again, how much of it is the fact that the medication costs more, or how much of it is that a company has been allowed to overinflate for years and run with a fat table when they really don't need that fat table? How much of it is actually the cost of the medication? Because I mean, let's.
Well, I haven't done an audit of
let's look at
Copaxone.
everything
I'm
we
just
buy.
saying, I don't know.
Let's look at everything we buy. Everything we buy, if you were to make it like this little injector without the medication, okay, what it costs the company to make that injector versus what they're going to charge you to pay for it, there's going to be a markup. Always, there's going to be a markup at all in any product you buy, from this medical tape to this injector to eyeglasses to whatever.
Right.
There's always a markup. Now, that markup is how much the market will bear. So if he knows that, like I said in my example, if he knows he can sell his apples to Billy for $30 and Billy won't bat an eyelash, then he's going to make sure that his supply chain is such that he can sell his apples at $30. If all of a sudden he can't sell his apples at $30, he has to sell them at $15, then what you will see is a slim down. You won't see an out of business. You will see a slim down, and companies would have to run.
You get to a point where you say that, okay, I will pay you $5 for a bushel of apples, but it costs you $10 to pick those apples. So you're going to say, okay, screw you.
We do it all the time.
No, you're not going to do it. You're not going to sell someone a bushel of apples for $5 if it costs you $10 to pick them. If you do, you're an idiot.
Well,
then you're going to go out of business.
No, because what the companies will do is, if it costs them $10 to make that pick that bushel of apples right now, okay, if they all of a sudden have to do that, then it will cost them $8 to make that bushel of apples within a year. I guarantee.
Do you really want your life-saving medication to start cutting corners to manufacture? Is that what you want?
But that's not the point.
No, that is the point. Do you really want them to cut corners?
Yes, I want them to cut the bureaucracy out real quick.
I'm not talking about the bureaucracy.
But that costs money, Anti-Trek. And that's where your $30 for a bushel of apples comes from.
Right, but we're not talking about a bushel of apples. We're talking about life-saving medication.
But it's the same principle.
No, it's not the same principle. Because if you're talking about things like quality control testing, we're talking about things like making sure the patients aren't suffering from severe side effects. We're talking about things like, we're not talking about, oh golly gee, Billy sent someone an apple with a worm. But at the same
time, stating that the rest of the world lives on the United States' bill is kind of arrogant. I'm sorry, but it is.
And Orville pharmaceutical. I understand people
hate. I'm sorry, but that's offensive to me as a Canadian when you sit there and say you guys get cheap medication because of us. That's rude and arrogant and under.
I'm
and
not.
You do say that. You just said it 5 minutes ago.
Right, what I'm saying is that the same company sells a medication for what and it's not like Copaxone is not making money hand over fist. Their executives are not swimming in solid gold swimming pools doing Scrooge McDucks. Okay, they are not. And so yes, the company is financially stable, but they're not freaking nutcases swimming in money. And yet that's what everybody thinks they are. Because but they have to charge multiple times the amount for the medication in the United States than they do in other countries, because in other countries they are forced to sell the product for less than the cost of the product. And so what happens, since other countries are forced to sell it for less than the cost of the product, they have to overinflate it. That's what happened when Ronald Reagan signed into law in the United States that hospitals could not turn people away based on their ability to pay money. What ended up happening was hospitals started overcharging for things like aspirin. So an aspirin, all of a sudden, one pill, an aspirin started costing $10. Why? Because they had to make up for the fact that people were coming into the ER and not paying. And so the only way they could do it was to cost shift. And so they would say, well, if nobody's going to pay their bill, then we're going to have to start charging the insurance companies $10 for an aspirin. That's the only way we're going to break even. And that's exactly what's going on right now on a global scale, since everybody else in the world is saying, well, we're not going to pay. So guess what, United States, you're going to pay triple.
But your government allows
and then you're going to say, well, you're being arrogant and a jerk because you think it's unfair that you pay triple.
But if you really rationalized it out, if you think about it, whatever the company is telling you it costs them to make it is probably estimated 3 times what it actually does. And that's the problem. They're allowed to get away with that.
What makes you think that they're making a 300% profit margin? Do you not look at?
Because if they can sell it to the rest of the world for less, then that means you're getting hosed.
No company makes a 300% profit margin. They don't. That's like I don't know why people believe this, but they don't.
Because there are people that believe that the Americans pay for everything in Canada and the rest of the world just floats on a check. I hate to tell you this, but our taxpayer dollars pays for our medical system.
I didn't.
And it's insulting to me when you sit there and say that the Americans pay for everything.
Your medical system, that doesn't change the fact that the companies aren't making 300% profit.
Perhaps we need more statistical information on this. I don't think we're going to settle that argument here today. But
for me, I come from it as a point of, okay, to sit there and say, well, we're getting hosed because of all of you. That is your basic argument, that you are getting screwed because of everybody else. Because everybody else isn't paying enough, you get hosed.
I think
that is your initial argument.
I'm not accusing Canadians of anything. It's not, it's not
your initial statement, correct? I just trying to is that your medication is higher because the rest of the world won't pay. That is your statement. Therefore, your argument is you're getting hosed because the rest of the world is living off your dollar.
I'm not saying we're living off your dollar. I'm saying, but that is a factual statement. If other countries are basically forcing the United States to pay more, that's what happens.
No.
Random Menace makes a comment. He says, why does X-ray cost you as an uninsured visitor, I guess it's 25 euros in Germany, and you pay as an insured in the US $150? In other words, the healthcare system in the USA has the worst setup in the developed world. And you're probably right on that, Random Menace.
But my point is, like, and this is where we get bogged down when it comes to healthcare, because right now the argument is that you can't go to a Canadian system because, well, that's communist. You can't go to a European system because that's communist.
Hold on. Just so you know, I just want you to know, I looked it up. Tevia, the company that manufactures Copaxone, had a profit margin of 4.47%.
Yeah.
That's the profit margin. All right. That's charging Americans I don't know how many times more money.
Okay. But now what I'm trying to get at, Salty Trigger, is if you look at how that company is run.
Well, then take over the company and make it efficient. But I'm saying that it's not like they're making this huge, grotesque profit margin off of this money that they're gouging us for.
That's
what your argument is that they're gouging you.
No, I'm not saying they're gouging us. I'm saying I'm not saying they're gouging. I'm saying that they are forced to charge that. Gouging would mean that they were actually taking a grotesque amount of profit from Americans
But again,
I'm not suggesting that at all.
It's offensive to say that it's because of everybody else. That's what I'm saying.
But it is because of everybody else. That's a fact. I'm sorry. That is if the cost, okay, at a 4.47% profit margin, okay, that means that if let's just take 4.4% off of the table, right? So that means that at 16,000, I don't know what let's just say it's break even just to be easy. So 16,000 is break even for you, and so I mean that.
Okay, but if I'm reporting 4.7% profit, okay, and my company has 14 people doing the same job, and my company has 13 people that basically sit around and do nothing, and then my company also has another 30,000 people doing another thing that they don't need to do, and I'm running on a fat staff. I'm running big because I can. That's the part that everybody misses. You're running big because you can.
Publicly traded company, and the shareholders would be going berserk.
Not really. That's easy
yes, really, because the shareholders would want the company running as efficiently as possible. That's what shareholders want. They don't want the company to be bloated and running inefficiently.
As long as they're making money, they don't care.
Captain Trek makes a good point. I was on a medication, he says, which was going to cost $200 every 3 months, or $2.23 per pill. The actual cost to make it was 21 cents. I imagine that's per pill.
I don't know the details of that.
But that's where I come from is this rumor that the world lives on the United States' bill, which annoys me.
Because the cost is shifted.
Because
at a 4% profit margin, the cost is clearly shifted. Because if the cost wasn't shifted, their profit margin would have to be somewhere in the order of 300%.
But if you're okay, but what's stopping your government from doing the same?
Because if our government did that, they would be out of business.
That's been used for everything under the sun, and it's never been proven true.
Because
the market reacts to the market. So if the market all of a sudden,
supply would be the supply would suddenly run to zero.
I doubt that, because there would be another company that would step in, guaranteed,
right? With no quality control, no safety precautions, and how many people would get sick?
But that's just fear mongering. Well, we have to pay this amount, or else we're all going to die.
Like when it comes to things like treatment for conditions like this,
Anti-Trekker, the point of the argument that I have a problem with it is not the fact of how much you're paying. The fact that I have the argument with is, if that's the case, every Canadian needs to stop paying taxes.
Why?
Right now. Because we're paying for nothing then. Apparently, according to you, we're paying for nothing. We don't have to do anything. We can just sit back, go like this, and the United States will pay for everything. That is your gimmick. That is what you say.
That is
insulting.
Guys, I think we got off the topic a bit.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's like, as long as nobody's offended or anything.
No, but it's just.
I don't
defend my country to the end because I'm sorry.
I appreciate that.
You blaming me because your medications cost more is rich.
I think you misunderstand me a little bit. I'm not trying to suggest that Canadians are bad people, or anything of the sort. However, if Canada says to company X, well, hey, you want our people to pay $6,000 a month for this medication. Tell you what, we'll pay $1,100 a month, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of what they're paying, right? And so the people at Copaxone are like, well, we need $6,000, and you're like, too bad, you're going to get $1,100, and they're like, great. And so what do? Well, guess what, United States? Then you're going to have to pay the $6,000. And there's no choice in the matter. And I mean, actually, it would probably be more like if everybody was paying. I don't know what percentage of the world's Copaxone goes to the United States versus other countries. So let's just say hypothetically that the United States uses 25% of the world's Copaxone. If that were the case, then the price of Copaxone would probably be somewhere around $2,000 or $3,000 a month if everybody was paying their fair share. But instead, because everybody else decides, well, we don't want to pay that much, then the United States gets to pay a whole lot more. And that's generally how it works, because the United States, we take it. I don't know why, but that's how it works. I don't know why it is that way, but that's how it's been. And I'm not defending it. I'm not attacking it. I'm just stating it as a fact. And I understand that it's not an attack against Canada.
It is. When you say that you're living on our bill.
Canada specifically.
Like
it's not like Canada is the only country doing it.
The way you say it, it comes across as, well, we wouldn't have to pay so much if you guys would just fucking pay already. That's the way you come across.
The problem is that I think that the way that prescription medications work is that I do think that it should be one price for everybody.
Well, that would work. That would be fine.
No, it would never work, because the problem is it's just like, think about this for gasoline, right? Americans pay way less for gasoline than, say, Europeans. Now, granted, that's mainly because of taxation. But imagine how Americans would react if they paid as much as Europeans did for gas, right? Americans would flip out.
Right? Well, and oil is traded on the American dollar.
Huh?
That and oil is traded on the American dollar.
Right, but I'm just saying that the Americans would completely flip out if we paid as much as Europeans do for gas. And so if the rest of the world started paying as much as Americans do for prescriptions, they would freak out.
But by your own by your own thing, it would still be less. The Americans would still be paying less. If the world, in your world,
the Americans would be paying less, but everybody else would be paying more. And that's the problem.
I just don't see it.
You don't see that everybody else would be paying more for their prescriptions if everybody paid the same amount?
No, because you at the negotiating table, everybody would argue for the lowest amount.
Right. Everybody would argue for the lowest amount, but somebody's still got to pay for it. The drugs ain't going to be free.
That supply would go low. The cost would go down. I guarantee it. It's like anything else in the world.
The cost doesn't get to go down just because we want it to go down. That's the problem. I understand the power of negotiation, but the power of negotiation doesn't mean that the cost goes down. The power of negotiation means you keep the profit level to a slim margin, but you can't make the profit margin disappear completely. If you do, you take away the motivation for the companies to manufacture at all, unless they're being manufactured by a government. Now, that's always a possibility. If you want to try and socialize the manufacture of prescription medications, that's a whole other discussion. But even then, who's going to take on that burden? I don't think anybody wants to even touch that barrel of monkeys. But I don't think that if just because you might be able to reduce the cost a bit, but you can't reduce the cost to zero. You're not going to be able to. You can't reduce the profit margin to zero.
You wouldn't be.
But right,
you would be trimming the fat. That's what you would be doing.
Right, but there's only so much fat to trim.
And how have you sat there and looked at the budget earnings of the company plus what's not on the sheet?
Not have I looked at every pharmaceutical company and the earnings?
But this is my point.
I looked at Tibia because they're the ones that we were talking about.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, right, it isn't the fact that other countries pay less. Other countries pay less because that's what they've negotiated. And the company therefore has to make it work. It's like if a company knows that they can only sell their product for a certain amount, they're going to make sure that their bottom line is covered. It's supply and demand. It's the way that capitalism is set up.
Right. But here's what
happens. To sit there and say that if the United States government forced them to sell it for less, they'd go out of business is a myth. It's never happened. If they have to sell it for less, then they're going to make it for less.
Because they're not going to, and you also keep in mind that it's also a myth to think that the United States doesn't have a group of people that check on these things. We have an entire department of the United States government that actually audits these companies and knows very well exactly how much they spend.
It's the same thing up here.
Development. And so, yes, we know exactly what they're spending. We know exactly what their research costs are, and we know that they're charging a fair price. And so it's not like we sit there and go, well, golly gee, they spent $5 developing this stuff, but they're charging $8,000 a dose. No, we know.
But I look at it like this, though, and you can't argue this. It forms on the whole disability thing, right? From then to now, it's always been about, well, who's going to pay for it?
Right.
That's what it all boils down to.
That is the problem.
And it all boils down to, well, we're doing it right, they're doing it wrong, and it's all their fault. There's always somebody to blame. There's a fall guy in every situation, in every conversation. In your conversation, the rest of the world is the fall guy, and that's why you guys are
No. I'm not blaming. That's the problem. I think you're misunderstanding. I don't think there's an easy there's not a person to blame here. I think that the problem is almost an irreconcilable mess. Because I don't think that I'm not trying to point the finger and say it's Canada's fault or it's the US's fault or it's the pharma's fault. I think that the situation is ballooned into this mess. And now we have to completely look at rebuilding a new system from scratch, because I don't see a simple fix as being able to fix this, period. Like, I don't, as far as the way the system is built right now, I don't think it's fixable.
No, because it's been let to go too long. Like, for instance, like when you look at different countries and just looking between Canada and the United States, to a Canadian, the American system is archaic and what the fuck.
I don't think it's archaic.
And then when you're on the opposite side of the coin, you look up and go, what the fuck? And it's two different mindsets. We've grown up with this set. You've grown up with this set.
Right.
And so for us, you guys are archaic. For the other side around, it's like, well, they've given into communism and socialism. What the fuck? And so it's just, you can't. The problem is like in every topic there is, one side has been put against the other.
Right.
So you can't have a conversation, because if you do, you're on opposite sides. There's the blame game. There's the, we're getting hosed because of you. Or, well, you guys can only do that because we foot the bill. That's,
the question becomes, how do we get, how do we get the billing part of it out of the question? And I don't know that there's an easy answer for that, because
the system is set for everything to make money. Everything's about money. It's not about what's right or what's wrong. The system has never been set up that way. The system is set up for make the most money you can at the time. That's what it is. You're out to make the most dollar you can. And that's why I use the example. If you know you can only sell your apples for $15 to Billy, but you know you can get away with selling your apples for $30 to Billy, then you're going to continue to sell your apples to $15 and $30, and you're just going to take the money that you get for the $30 and build up your industry that way.
But is there a way to make it so that you're not selling apples to Billy?
And Adega says the problem is that people outside the medical profession are trying to dictate what it should be.
Which is something that I said early on in this conversation.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and by the way, just so everybody knows, me and Robert are definitely not enemies. I don't
No,
certainly not.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah,
before.
we've already had this before, but we're buddies. But yeah, I think that I do think that something like you know, I don't even know. I know this would never happen, you know, but play with me here for a second. A sci-fi world for a moment. Imagine, if you will, a global healthcare federation, a global healthcare organization that sole purpose was to produce, administer, and provide all forms of healthcare for all people. And so they would be the pharmaceutical, the research, the doctors, for all healthcare, all people, everywhere. And they would be no. I know it's laughable. I know in the current geopolitical climate it would never happen.
Have you seen the UN?
Yeah.
I was laughing at a comment in chat, just to be clear.
Okay. And to Adega's point, and to yours, when I applied for disability, and it goes before the disability board, who are nameless, and you can't actually bring them into when you do an appeal, they're not at the meeting. But anyway, the appeal board and the disability board, more so, there isn't a doctor on that panel,
right,
that approves or disapproves disability. There isn't a doctor or a person with DR in their name in any sense of the word at all, where there should be.
Right. And I'm talking about, like, with this global organization that I'm talking about, it would be, except for at the highest level, for just on an organizational basis, it would be entirely healthcare professionals, or you know, you would have research scientists that were specialists in their various areas. You would have pharmaceutical specialists in their various areas. Yes, you would have some administrators for, and for each group, and then you would have administrators overseeing, like presidents and vice presidents and stuff. But the people making the day-to-day decisions would all be medical professionals. The problem with this, of course, is in our current geopolitical state, there are too many people that are enemies of other people, right? That would be like, could you, because imagine, like, the big bonus to this would be, imagine if an epidemic broke out in, let's just say, pick a random country. So India, we had some kind of epidemic breakout. With this organization could, in an instant, send 1,000 doctors there and set up a lab and get all the people they need to get it contained, get it taken care of, right? And get the infrastructure set up that they need. If that thing spread out, they could very quickly get the response team in place. Think about with COVID, how much better we could have handled COVID. Now, On the downside, of course, in the real world with our current geopolitical situation, oh no, it's China. We're not sending anybody to China. We don't like China, and so we end up with that, right? And so unfortunately, it will never happen because we have a bunch of countries that act like 5-year-olds instead of acting like distinguished politicians.
Well, and back reining it back into what we were originally talking about, what needs to happen, and I think Adaga would agree, is it it needs to be put back into the medical profession.
Right.
Medical professionals need to be handling the medical care, not pencil pushing bureaucrats who know absolutely jack shite about anything they're talking about. All they have is a chart, like with ankylosing spondylitis. Well, you're not disabled until you hit stage 4. Well,
and and what would determine whether or not you got a medication was whether your doctor thought you needed the medication, not whether or not they, not whether or not the insurance company says you can have it because it's in the budget. And if it was a global based organization, you know, the currency of that global based organization is they just get it, period. You know, they, you know, as far as the, you know, they need an MRI machine, they get it. They need a dialysis machine, they get it. You know, whatever they need, they get. Because on a global level, and that's why you make it a global organization. Because if you make global,
well, they have that. It's called the World Health Organization.
Yeah,
did you know that?
Yeah. but if you did some kind of global health organization like this, you know, what could possibly be more beneficial to all of mankind than a global health organization whose sole purpose was to make everybody in the world?
But there's no money in that. There's your problem.
Yeah, well,
there's no money in that.
I'm just spitballing here, but the problem is that would be a real solution.
Yeah,
you know,
but again, it boils down to medical professionals need to be put back in charge,
right?
And
but you also need, but that's also a way to take money out of the equation.
Yeah,
right. Because we need to A, put medical professionals in charge, B, take the profit motive completely out. And I mean completely out. And the only way to make it work is honestly, and this is what I was kind of getting to, and again, to my conservative friends, I'm sorry, this is going to offend you. I don't care. Facts are facts. And you guys know, for the most part, I'm a classical liberal or libertarian, but this just ain't one of those times. We need to take profit out of health 100%, and that means all of it. That means
one of these days I'm going to have Adaga up here with us.
and I know that offends my conservative friends because they think that the profit motive is the most pure way to do things, but if you have health for profit, then poor people suffer. And that's just wrong. You know, just because someone is not of means does not mean that they should suffer. I understand that, hey, you know what? If somebody is poor and they don't have a Lexus, I don't care. You know, that's sorry, I don't. If somebody is poor and they don't have a really nice house, I don't care. If they have basic housing, I get that. You know, I'm not going to feel bad for somebody for not having a luxury item. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to sound heartless, but that's just the way life is. I get that. However, if somebody is poor, that doesn't mean we let them die of whooping cough. If somebody is poor, it doesn't mean we let them suffer of some chronic disease that can be treated. You know, if somebody is poor, it doesn't mean that we let them go without glasses just because they can't afford them.
Yeah.
And so, I'm sorry, but this kind of attitude that people have is just sick and wrong and needs to end. But the problem is the only way to deal with it is to take money out of the equation. And the only way to take money out of the equation is to take it out of everything. And that doesn't just mean the doctors. It means the pharmaceutical companies. It means just every step of the journey of the healthcare journey, which is a difficult thing to think about. And that's not going to happen anytime soon. And it's certainly not going to happen until multiple countries could actually work together to do it. And one country trying to say we're going to do universal health care and do it with tax money. No, that's not doing it. And no offense to Canada or any other country that's trying to do universal health care. That's not doing it. That doesn't take the profit motive out of it. All that's doing is making it so the government is paying it. There's still profit going on. It's just not people, even, that just means that the person, Robert's not paying it. The government's paying it. It's just shifting the profit motive. And so instead, we need to remove the profit motive. But that's not happening.
Not in the current setup. No, you couldn't do that in the current setup because the current setup would make that fail real quick.
But yeah, it's not going to happen. Not until politicians stop behaving like asses and start behaving like human beings. And unfortunately, I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon.
No, probably not.
Sorry, didn't mean to be a downer on this week's history.
All right.
It was a good discussion, that's for sure.
Yes. It's been a while since I got heated. Other than at my doctors and nurses who are boneheads.
And you know what? And Yitza, I'm sure you're saying that tongue in cheek, but it's universal health care is not communist. At best, it's socialist. And let me say this too, and I don't know how many of your followers are conservative, but having a socialist program is not the same as being a socialist. And I am so sick of that. You're a socialist because you have, then you're a socialist because you have public schools.
Yeah, instead of private.
Or you're a socialist because, Jeff is obviously a socialist because he works at the library.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Yeah. We have socialist programs. That doesn't make you a socialist. A socialist nation is when everything is done that way, not just when some things are done that way.
But, But in regards to the disability question, we have come a ways.
We have
where things are now recognized, maybe even arguably too recognized, but it is recognized now. Some things that are getting listed, I sit there and question, but for the most part, we're getting there slowly. But I think the biggest thing that, like I said at the beginning, the biggest argument right now I see is between visible disability and unseen disability.
Yes.
Because a person with a visible disability is looked at one way compared to a person who has an invisible disability. There is always that stigma, and that's one of the last stigmas that have to go, in my opinion. Because just because a person looks a certain way or acts, like with me, you wouldn't be able to tell that I'm sick. There are days where it's really obvious, but but I have my moments where there isn't that opinion, and it's because it's not a visible disability. I can put my shirt on and hide the tubes that are coming out of my chest. Or if I really wanted to get needles every week, I could get a fistula and then really hide it and nobody could see it. It'd just be an oversized blood vessel in my arm.
Yeah, we
have
need
a good one, Adega.
and it's difficult for me sometimes too, because like I'll tell you, when I get so frustrated, like I assume you have like handicap spaces in front of stores in Canada.
Yeah.
So like I hate it, because when I was young, I used to think, man, there's always too many handicap spaces, and now I'm always thinking, man, there's not enough.
Yeah.
And now that I have a handicap placard,
it's a difference when the shoe's on the other foot. Yeah.
It actually is. And the but the funny thing is that now I see someone, they pull up into a handicap space, and then they get out of their car and they walk just fine to the store. And I hate that feeling of looking at them going, are they really disabled?
Yeah.
Or are they just using grandma's handicap placard? And because that's something that I always,
it's the stigma that's on it,
right?
Because it's not a visible disability,
right? And I know I shouldn't be thinking that, because on the one hand, okay, maybe they are just, and because quite frankly, that's between them and God, right? Because if they're borrowing grandma's handicap placard, shame on them. That's a horrible thing to do. And by the way, if you are borrowing grandma's handicap placard and parking in a handicap space just to get a better parking space, don't do that. That is like the worst thing you can do, because somebody who is mobily disabled and struggles to get into the store, and you're taking that parking space and they need that space. Yeah, that's wrong. Don't ever do that. But
isn't that illegal?
It is. It's actually, yeah. It's depending on what state you're in, it can be a high fine misdemeanor, and in some states it's actually a low level felony. But yeah, do not do that. But most people don't care. They do it because it's convenient. Their handicap is, I didn't feel like walking very far. But I also shouldn't make that assumption, because for all I know, they have a disability that, like you said, is invisible. They can't. Maybe they're just in a lot of pain, but they're not showing it.
Yeah.
And
when you have chronic pain, you learn to be able to do that real quick.
Because
the last thing you want to hear is, "Oh, are you okay?"
And I can walk without my cane. It's just safer for me to have my cane with me.
Yeah.
And so I choose to have my cane with me, because if I stumble and fall down, I can't get back up. And so, if it's much, much safer for me to walk with my cane, I'm not going to take any chances. And if somebody's like in a situation where they just don't like the stigma of having the cane, and so they walk without it, and I'm making that assumption, I could be wasting my time getting angry about something that ain't worth getting angry about.
Yeah.
But anyway, but I had fun. Thanks for having me on.
No problem.
Jeff, why don't you ever come on when we do Jeopardy on Friday?
Putting him in the hot seat.
Yeah, I'm putting you in the hot seat because I keep begging you to come on. You'd be fun.
Well, maybe I'll come on. I told Thomas I would come on if he would do something, and he said, forget it. So
Thomas, he's shy.
Also on a side note, I understand you live in a cave in Minecraft.
Occasionally, yes.
I'm going to have to join your world one day. Teach you how to actually build a house. It's not hard, Teacher Salty. It's not hard.
I haven't been in Minecraft in a while, though.
Build a house. Quit living in a cave.
I have been spending all my time in recent days working on this project. I don't know. Do you ever? You probably never come onto our movie nights, do you?
Once in a while.
Okay.
But
whenever Matthew, do you know about Matthew's recent situation with his wife?
No.
Okay, so Matthew's wife Amy, completely out of the blue, broke her ankle in 3 places.
Ouch.
Yeah. And so hopefully they did a bone density scan. He said he was going to get the results hopefully today. So they're trying to figure out why she broke her ankle in 3 places. But so we probably won't be doing a movie night this week, but hopefully next week we will. And so I'm trying to do something extra special because I usually do like little silly edits in the movies and episodes of Star Trek and stuff that we watch. And do you remember the episode, The Day of the Dove?
No.
Oh, come on. The one where the alien gives everybody swords, and so they're fighting on the Enterprise with swords.
It's a gaseous type entity, and it gets the Klingons and the Enterprise crew together on the Enterprise.
You don't remember that?
No.
Wow. Fine, whatever. So in Day of the Dove, that during the climactic fight at the end, Kirk and one of the most awesome Klingons of the entire original series, Kang, end up fighting mano a mano with swords. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm working on editing that sword fight. I mean, I'm sharing screen, sir, with you there. So that's the energy creature. You might notice the face has been altered slightly. But that now you'll notice.
Okay, now I recognize this, yeah.
Okay, so, but check out Kirk's sword here when I scroll forward a little bit.
Lightsaber.
Yes, so we're doing a full-on lightsaber fight. And so I've actually been editing the entire fight sequence so that Kang and Kirk are... Kang's obviously will be a red lightsaber, Kirk's will be blue. And... you can see like this one goes behind Kirk's head. That kind of stuff very tricky to do.
Yeah.
And been working on this for the last couple of weeks while Amy has been recovering from her broken ankle.
Ah.
But
they've been watching the Star Trek films.
Okay.
Yes. And we're up to
watching
number 6.
And they're watching a Star Trek episode that kind of goes with the movie. So they're doing Star Trek 6 next.
So he didn't do. So you didn't do First Contact on First Contact Day. What's wrong with you?
Sorry. First Contact will do probably at the beginning.
Your favorite movie, isn't it, Salty?
Well, he also did Star Trek 4 several weeks before the 35th anniversary. In theaters. So,
by the way, you know what's funny is watching Day of the Dove as much as I have recently because of doing this editing, is how incredibly similar Day of the Dove is to Return of the Jedi.
Maybe they got some inspiration. You never know.
Well, right down to the fight ends with Kirk throwing his saber away, like Luke does to the Emperor. So
yeah,
just thought that was funny. But yeah, and because the whole point was to the energy creature was trying to get them to be angry and to use their aggressive feelings.
Yeah. Show hostility toward each other because it fed on it.
Yeah. No, it would be.
Sounds like. No, I'm not going to go there. I might get my show canceled. I was going to say sounds like modern politics, but anyway.
I was actually thinking about putting the Emperor's face up there, going, "Good, use your aggressive feelings."
Yes. All right. Well, with that, folks, we've kind of gone over the limit here as normal. But thank you all, and as Richard would always say, thank you and good night, folks.